On January the 28th, 1997, a meeting took place in the Bournemouth Winter Gardens. The purpose of the gathering was to save the local football club, at that stage in the lower reaches of what is now League One. The club had debts of around £4.5 million, but it was the £350,000 owed to the Inland Revenue that threatened to send the club out of existence after a winding-up order was imposed. It's extraordinary that the club, AFC Bournemouth, are now an established Premier League side. That time, fans helped to raise a fighting fund of £300,000, partly after a bucket collection, and the club survived. Just. There was one press conference at 12 o'clock when at 5 to 12 I didn't know if I had the money to continue trading, said administrator Gerald Krasner. I came within 5 minutes of liquidating the club. But that wasn't the end of their troubles. 11 years later, the club went into administration, were docked 10 points and dropped into League Two. But there were severe doubts about whether Bournemouth would even be allowed to compete in the following season. Uncertainty over their finances and a proposed takeover meant that the Football League tried to block them from taking part. In the end, they were allowed to take their place in the division, but only with a 17-point penalty. Relegation into non-league looked certain, particularly after manager Kevin Bond was sacked early in the season and his replacement, Jimmy Quinn, was also dismissed on New Year's Day, following calamitous defeats in the league and to Blythe Spartans in the FA Cup. A 31-year-old ex-defender, who made 313 appearances for the club before having to retire with a knee injury and was the head of the club's Centre of Excellence, was put in caretaker charge. Nobody could have possibly known that Eddie Howe would eventually lead them to the Premier League. Howe, who had no previous managerial experience and was the youngest boss in English football, inherited a team second bottom of League Two and 7 points from safety. Going into the last home game, they required a victory to ensure a remarkable survival, which they duly earned with club hero Steve Fletcher, who had returned from Crawley earlier in the season, scoring a winner against Grimsby. The great escape from starting the season with a 17-point penalty had been achieved. Without the deduction, they would have been a handful of points off the playoffs. In Howe's first full season, they won automatic promotion back to League One, finishing second despite a transfer embargo remaining as the last punishment for their administration. But by now, Howe was getting attention and was approached by Charlton, Crystal Palace and Burnley for their managers' jobs. Despite initially saying he would stay, he left for Burnley in 2011 with the team second in League One. Lee Bradbury took over, but despite reaching the playoffs, they lost in heartbreaking fashion to Huddersfield on penalties. The following season was disappointing. Bradbury was sacked and his replacement, Paul Groves, also went after a calamitous start to the 12-13 campaign, and that was when Howe came back, citing family reasons, and was immediately successful. The team were 20th in the table when he returned, but he turned the season around and won promotion to the Championship. As important as Howe to Bournemouth's incredible rise had been Russian businessman Maxim Demin, who bought the club along with chairman Eddie Mitchell in 2011. Demin has poured millions into the club, improving the stadium but most crucially, the squad. His investment allowed Bournemouth to nearly quadruple their transfer record for striker Matt Tubbs just after he arrived, and also make moves for players like Callum Wilson in later years. In the early days of his tenure, Demin's wife Irina gave a half-time team talk, and it worked. They were 1-0 down to MK Dons and ended up drawing 2-2. It was in 2014-15 that their remarkable rise was complete. They spent much of the season at the top of the Championship, the highlight of the early months being an incredible 8-0 win over Birmingham. They didn't lose a game after February, and a 3-0 thrashing of Bolton in the penultimate match virtually sealed promotion to the top flight for the first time in the club's history. This club was on its knees, said Howe, about when he took over. From near extinction to the top flight in 6 years, and after that, comfortably surviving for 2 seasons in a row was almost simple. Given that they're backed by a Russian millionaire, this isn't quite the romantic fairy tale that some say, but for a club the size of Bournemouth to come from where they are, it's still an absolutely remarkable story.